Shut your mouth and be quiet, you monkey. I won't tolerate any more noise from you.
Picture this. A flight attendant standing over an 8-year-old girl in first class, her face twisted with contempt, saying words that would make your blood boil. Your kind shouldn't be asking so many questions. Children like you should be grateful you're even up here. Now shut up and be quiet before I move you to the back where you belong. The little girl, tears streaming down her face, clutches a stuffed giraffe to her chest while other passengers sit frozen in shock. But here's what that flight attendant didn't know. She had no idea who this child really was. And in less than an hour she would receive a phone call that would destroy her entire career and change her life forever. What happened next is absolutely unbelievable, and I promise you this story will leave you speechless. It started on an ordinary Tuesday morning in the Hayes residence, a stunning modern home overlooking the San Francisco Bay. 8-year-old Veronica Hayes woke up to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows in her bedroom. Her room was every child's dream, filled with airplane models hanging from the ceiling, each one meticulously detailed. There were vintage propeller planes, sleek jets, even a miniature version of Air Force One. But despite all the luxury surrounding her, Veronica was nervous. Today was the day she'd been both excited and terrified about for weeks. She was flying alone for the very first time. Veronica sat up in her bed, immediately reaching for Mr. Patches, her beloved stuffed giraffe. The toy was worn from years of love, one ear slightly torn and re-sewn, its spots faded from countless adventures. She hugged him tight and whispered, "We're going to see Grandma today, Mr. Patches. Just you and me on a big plane." Her voice trembled slightly. Even though her mother owned one of the largest airline companies in the world, Veronica had never flown without her. The thought of navigating an airport, sitting on a plane, and landing in a different city all by herself felt enormous. Her nanny, Rosa, knocked softly and entered the room. Rosa had been with the Hayes family since Veronica was born, a warm Puerto Rican woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an infectious laugh. She'd practically raised Veronica while her mother built her empire. Rosa immediately noticed the anxiety on Veronica's face and sat down on the edge of the bed. "Mija, what's wrong? You've been talking about visiting Grandma for months." Veronica fidgeted with Mr. Patch's ear. "I know, but what if I get lost? What if I can't find my gate? What if something goes wrong and Mommy isn't there?" Her questions tumbled out in a rush. Veronica had always been a curious child, the kind who asked why about everything. She wanted to understand how things worked, why people did what they did, how the world fit together. Her mother always encouraged it, telling her that questions were how we learned, how we grew, how we changed the world. Rosa pulled Veronica into a hug. "You listen to me. You are Veronica Marie Hayes. You are smart, you are brave, and you have traveled to more places than most adults ever will. The only difference today is that you're doing it on your own, and that just means you're growing up." She pulled back and looked Veronica in the eyes. "Plus, your mommy has arranged everything. The gate agents will take special care of you. You'll have your special phone if you need anything. And remember what your mommy always says." Veronica smiled slightly. "That I can do hard things." "Exactly. Now let's get you packed and ready. We have a plane to catch." As Rosa helped Veronica pack her small rolling suitcase, she made sure to include all the essentials. A change of clothes, Veronica's favorite book about Amelia Earhart, some coloring supplies, and of course Mr. Patches secured safely in the front pocket. Veronica picked out her outfit carefully, a purple dress with white sneakers, and the special bracelet her mother had given her on her last birthday. The bracelet was white gold with a small airplane charm, and engraved on the inside were the words, "You are enough. You are loved. You are powerful." Veronica never took it off. It made her feel connected to her mother, even when they were apart. And they were apart a lot. Catherine Hayes, Veronica's mother, was the CEO and founder of SkyBridge Airlines, one of the most successful and rapidly expanding airlines in North America. She was constantly traveling, attending board meetings, negotiating deals, overseeing operations across dozens of cities. Veronica understood, or at least tried to. Her mother was important. She helped people travel to see their families, to go on adventures, to chase their dreams. But sometimes late at night, Veronica wished her mother's work wasn't quite so demanding. This trip to Chicago to visit her grandmother was supposed to be different. Originally, Catherine was going to take Veronica herself. They were going to make it a special mother-daughter weekend. But 2 days ago, an emergency situation had emerged at one of SkyBridge's hub airports, and Catherine had to fly to Denver immediately. She'd sat Veronica down, apologized profusely, and promised they'd have their special weekend soon. But Grandma was expecting them, and Grandma wasn't getting any younger. Catherine had made the difficult decision to let Veronica fly as an unaccompanied minor. She'd personally arranged every detail, made sure her most trusted staff would be monitoring the flight, and given Veronica a phone that had a direct line to her personal number. Rosa drove Veronica to San Francisco International Airport in the family's car, chatting cheerfully the whole way to keep Veronica's mind off her nerves. When they pulled up to the departures terminal, Veronica's stomach did a little flip. The airport was massive, bustling with travelers pulling suitcases, families saying goodbye, business people rushing with their briefcases and laptops. Rosa parked and helped Veronica with her bag, then walked her inside to the SkyBridge Airlines check-in area. That's where they met Marcus Chin, a gate agent who'd worked for SkyBridge for nearly 20 years. Marcus was in his 50s, with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He'd seen the special notation on Veronica's ticket, unaccompanied minor, VIP attention required, and he'd also recognized the last name Hayes. He wasn't sure if this was the CEO's daughter, but he treated every unaccompanied minor like they were the most important passenger on the flight. That was just who Marcus was. Well, hello there. You must be Veronica, Marcus said warmly, kneeling down to be at her eye level. I'm Marcus, and I'm going to be making sure you have the best flight ever today. Is this your first time flying solo? Veronica nodded shyly, clutching Mr. Patches a little tighter. Rosa gently encouraged her to answer. Yes, sir. I'm going to see my grandma in Chicago. How wonderful. Chicago is a great city. Have you been there before? Marcus asked, already beginning the check-in process on his computer while keeping his attention on Veronica. A few times, but always with my mommy. She's usually with me, but she had to work. Veronica's voice was small, and Marcus could hear the nervousness in it. Well, you know what? You're going to do amazing. And I'm going to personally walk you to your gate and introduce you to the flight crew. They're going to take excellent care of you. Plus, I see here you're in first class. That's pretty special. Marcus printed out her boarding pass and a special lanyard that identified her as an unaccompanied minor. He placed it around her neck gently. Rosa hugged Veronica one more time, kissing the top of her head. You call your mommy if you need anything, okay? Anything at all. And give Grandma a big hug from me. Veronica nodded, fighting back tears. She didn't want to cry in front of Marcus. She wanted to be brave. As Rosa walked away, Veronica felt a moment of panic, but Marcus immediately engaged her. So, Veronica, I noticed all those airplane models you were telling me about. Do you want to be a pilot when you grow up? They began walking toward security, and Marcus's warm presence made everything feel less scary. Maybe, Veronica said, warming up a bit. Or maybe I'll design planes. Or run an airline like my mommy. She owns SkyBridge. That's her company. She said it matter-of-factly, the way children do when they don't fully understand the magnitude of what they're saying. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. So this was Catherine Hayes' daughter. He'd seen Catherine Hayes in company meetings on video calls in the quarterly newsletters. She was a legend in the airline industry, a black woman who'd built an empire in a field dominated by old white men. She'd started as a gate agent herself, worked her way up through every department, and eventually bought a struggling regional airline and transformed it into SkyBridge. And here was her daughter, flying alone, trusting his airline, trusting him. Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility, and he was determined not to let this little girl down. Your mom must be pretty amazing, Marcus said as they walked through the priority security line. I bet she works really hard. She does. Sometimes I wish she didn't have to work so much, but she says she's building something important. She says she wants to make sure everyone feels welcome when they fly, no matter who they are or what they look like. Veronica was relaxing now, chatting more freely. Marcus had that effect on people. After clearing security, Marcus walked Veronica all the way to the gate. The flight to Chicago wasn't boarding yet, so they sat in the waiting area, and Marcus continued to chat with her. Veronica asked him question after question. How long had he worked for the airline? What was his favorite plane? Had he ever met a famous person? How did the baggage system work? Why did planes have to taxi before takeoff? Marcus answered every single question patiently, delighted by her curiosity. This was a smart, engaged, wonderful kid. He couldn't imagine anyone being anything but charmed by her. When boarding was finally called, Marcus walked Veronica down the jetway personally. He introduced her to the gateside staff, making sure everyone knew she was an unaccompanied minor and needed to be monitored. Then he brought her onto the plane straight to first class, seat 2A, a window seat. He helped her stow her small bag in the overhead compartment, made sure Mr. Patches was comfortably situated in the seat next to her, and double-checked that her seatbelt was properly fastened. "Now, the flight attendants are going to take great care of you, okay? If you need anything at all, you just press this button right here." He showed her the call button. "And they'll come help you right away. You've got your phone if you need to call your mom, you've got snacks, you've got your book. You're all set." Marcus smiled warmly at her. "Thank you, Mr. Marcus," Veronica said, feeling genuinely grateful. He'd made everything so much easier. "You're very welcome, Veronica. Have a wonderful flight and give your grandma my best." Marcus waved and headed back down the jetway, feeling good about how he'd handled things. As Veronica settled into her seat, she looked around first class with wide eyes. The seats were huge and plush, covered in soft leather. There was so much legroom. She'd flown first class before with her mother, but somehow it felt different being here alone. It felt grown up and a little bit scary. Other passengers were boarding now, filing past her to find their seats. An older couple, the woman with silver hair perfectly styled, the man in an expensive suit, smiled at her as they took seats across the aisle. A businessman, Asian, probably in his 40s, settled into the seat in front of her, immediately pulling out his laptop. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, with perfect makeup and designer clothes, took a seat a few rows back, already taking selfies. And then there were the flight attendants. Veronica watched as they moved through the cabin, greeting passengers, helping with bags, offering drinks. There were 2 working first class today. One was a man, probably in his 30s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. His name tag read Tom. The other was a woman, maybe mid-30s, blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Her name tag read Jessica. But Veronica didn't think anything of it. She was too busy looking out the window, watching the ground crew load bags, watching other planes taxi past, feeling the excitement building despite her nerves. She was really doing this. She was flying alone. Her mother would be so proud. Now, while Veronica was settling into her seat, marveling at the adventure ahead of her, we need to talk about Jessica Morrison. Because to understand what was about to happen, you need to understand who Jessica was and how she'd ended up at this breaking point in her life. Jessica Morrison woke up that same Tuesday morning in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in Daly City, just south of San Francisco. The apartment was nothing like the Hayes residence. The carpet was worn, the paint was peeling in places, and you could hear the neighbors through the thin walls. Jessica's alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning, the same time it went off every day she had an early shift. She slapped it off and lay there for a moment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, feeling the familiar weight of exhaustion and resentment settle over her. She dragged herself out of bed and shuffled to the bathroom, avoiding looking at herself in the mirror for as long as possible. When she finally did glance up, she saw a woman who looked older than her 36 years. There were dark circles under her eyes. Lines had formed around her mouth, not from smiling but from frowning, from pressing her lips together to keep from saying what she really thought. Her blonde hair, which she'd once been proud of, now seemed dull and lifeless. She looked tired. She looked bitter. She looked exactly how she felt. Jessica went through her morning routine mechanically. Shower. Makeup, though she didn't put in much effort anymore. Uniform, the SkyBridge Airlines flight attendant uniform that she'd once been so proud to wear and now felt like a costume from a place she'd grown to hate. As she buttoned up the blazer, she walked past the small kitchen counter and saw them. The bills. Red stamps. Final notices. Collection agency letters. Her stomach clenched. The credit card bill maxed out. The medical bills from her daughter's emergency room visit last year, still not fully paid off. The lawyer fees from her divorce, which had nearly bankrupted her. And rent, always rent, due in just a few days, and she was still $200 short. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail from yesterday that she'd been ignoring. She played it, already knowing what it would be. "Ms. Morrison, this is Jennifer from Account Recovery Services calling about your outstanding balance of $3,247. We need to discuss payment arrangements immediately. Please return this call at your earliest convenience." Jessica deleted it. What was she supposed to say? She didn't have $3,000. She barely had $300. On the refrigerator, held up by a magnet, was a photograph that felt like it was mocking her. It showed a younger Jessica, maybe 22 years old, in her brand new flight attendant uniform on her very first day. Her eyes were bright, her smile genuine and full of hope. She'd just been hired by what was then Pacific West Airlines, before it got bought out by SkyBridge. She'd been so excited, so full of dreams. She was going to see the world. She was going to meet interesting people. She was going to build a career, move up to international routes, maybe even become a lead flight attendant or trainer. The sky was the limit. That was 15 years ago. 15 years of the same routes, the same recycled air, the same canned announcements, the same fake smile. She'd applied for promotions over and over. Led attendant positions, trainer positions, even ground operations management. She'd been passed over every single time. They always went with someone younger, someone prettier, someone who knew someone. Jessica had watched people with half her experience get promoted while she stayed exactly where she was, serving drinks and pretzels at 30,000 feet. And the passengers. God, the passengers. Especially in first class. They were the worst. Entitled, demanding, treating her like she was invisible or like she was their personal servant. Do you know how many times she'd been snapped at, talked down to, had drinks thrown at her because they weren't cold enough? How many times she'd smiled and apologized when she wanted to scream? And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was watching people who clearly had everything, who'd never struggled a day in their lives, waltz onto the plane like they owned it, like they deserved to be there, while she had to scrape together money just to keep a roof over her head. Jessica heard movement from the other room. Her roommate, Denise, emerged in pajamas, yawning. Denise worked as a nurse and was on the night shift rotation, so their schedules barely overlapped. Early one today? Denise asked, heading for the coffee pot. Yeah. Chicago run. Jessica's voice was flat. Denise poured herself coffee and studied Jessica for a moment. You okay? You seem more tense than usual lately. Jessica shrugged. Just tired. Same shit, different day. Jess, I'm worried about you. You used to love your job. I know things have been hard since the divorce, since you lost custody of Emma, but you're different now. You're angry all the time. Denise's voice was gentle, concerned. Jessica's jaw tightened at the mention of her daughter. Emma. 12 years old, living with her father and his new wife in their nice house in the suburbs with their nice yard and their nice stable life. Jessica got her every other weekend when her schedule allowed, which wasn't often enough. The court had ruled that Jessica's unpredictable flight schedule and financial instability made her ex-husband the better primary custodian. That ruling had shattered something in Jessica. She'd lost her marriage, lost her daughter, and was barely hanging on to her job and her apartment. I'm fine, Jessica said curtly. I just need to get through today. Denise didn't push it. She'd learned that when Jessica got defensive there was no point. Okay. Well, be safe. Try to have a good day. Jessica grabbed her bag and headed out the door without responding. Good day. What a joke. The drive to the airport was the same as always. Traffic, exhaust fumes, billboards advertising lives she'd never have. By the time Jessica parked in the employee lot and walked into the terminal, that familiar mask had already slid into place. The professional smile. The neutral expression. The flight attendant persona that hid everything boiling underneath. She checked in for her shift, went through the pre-flight briefing and headed to the gate. That's where she ran into Tom Hendricks, her colleague who'd be working first class with her today. Tom was a decent guy, one of the few people at work Jessica could tolerate. He'd been a flight attendant for about 7 years and unlike Jessica, he still seemed to actually enjoy the job. He greeted her with his usual cheerful smile. Hey Jess. Ready for another exciting journey to the Windy City? Tom was always trying to keep things light. Sure, Jessica muttered, barely making eye contact. Tom's smile faded a bit. He'd noticed Jessica's mood deteriorating over the past year, watched her become more withdrawn, more irritable. He tried to talk to her about it a few times, but she always shut him down. You okay? He asked carefully. Why does everyone keep asking me that? I'm fine. Jessica's tone was sharp enough that Tom took a small step back. Okay. Just checking. Tom decided to let it go. They had a flight to work. As they boarded the aircraft and began their preparations, Jessica went through the motions automatically. Check the emergency equipment. Stock the galley. Review the passenger manifest. And that's when she saw it. Seat 2A, unaccompanied minor, Veronica Hayes. Great. A kid flying alone. That meant extra work, extra attention required, probably a needy child who'd be pressing the call button every 5 minutes. Jessica was up in first class, arranging bottles in the beverage cart, when she heard Marcus's cheerful voice coming down the jetway. She glanced up and saw him walking hand in hand with a little black girl, maybe 8 or 9, clutching a stuffed giraffe. The girl was looking around with wide, curious eyes, and Marcus was chatting with her like they were old friends. Jessica watched as Marcus brought the child to seat 2A, helped her get settled, showed her the call button, made sure she was comfortable. He was spending so much time and energy on this one kid, being so warm and attentive, and something about it grated on Jessica. She couldn't even fully articulate why it bothered her. Maybe it was because Marcus seemed so happy, so fulfilled by his job, while she felt dead inside. Maybe it was because this little girl was flying first class, clearly from a wealthy family, while Jessica's own daughter was being raised by someone else. Maybe it was jealousy, resentment, or maybe it was something uglier that Jessica didn't want to acknowledge even to herself. Marcus waved goodbye to the girl and headed back up the aisle. As he passed Jessica, he smiled. Sweet kid. First time flying alone. She's a little nervous but doing great. Take good care of her, okay? Jessica forced a smile. Of course. But inside she was already annoyed. Of course everyone expected her to go above and beyond for this child. Nobody ever asked if she was okay, if she needed anything, if she was struggling. But she was expected to be endlessly patient and caring for everyone else. Tom had noticed Veronica too, and his reaction was completely different. He walked over to her seat with a warm smile. Hi there. I'm Tom and I'll be one of your flight attendants today. What's your name? Veronica, she said shyly. Well, it's very nice to meet you, Veronica. Is this your first time flying by yourself? Tom crouched down to be at her level. Veronica nodded. Oh, I'm going to see my grandma. How exciting. Well, if you need anything at all during the flight, you just let me or Jessica know, okay? We're here to help. Tom gestured to Jessica, who managed a tight smile and a small wave. Veronica smiled back at both of them, feeling a little more at ease. As the rest of the passengers boarded, Veronica watched everything with intense curiosity. The older couple settling across from her introduced themselves as Margaret and Harold Peterson. Margaret had noticed Veronica's unaccompanied minor lanyard and gave her a warm smile. Flying all by yourself? My goodness, aren't you brave? When I was your age, I'd never even been on a plane. Veronica beamed at the compliment. My mommy says I can do hard things. Your mommy sounds very wise, Margaret said kindly. The businessman in front of Veronica, David Chin, also turned around briefly. First time solo? He asked with a friendly smile. When Veronica nodded, he gave her a thumbs up. You're going to do great, kid. Pro tip, airplane cookies are always better than airplane pretzels. Veronica giggled at that. Even Tiffany, the young woman a few rows back, glanced up from her phone long enough to notice Veronica and think she was adorable, though she quickly went back to scrolling through Instagram. The cabin was filling up, and Jessica moved through doing her pre-flight duties with mechanical efficiency. She barely made eye contact with passengers as she checked seatbelt and overhead bins. Tom, on the other hand, was his usual friendly self, chatting with people, making jokes, creating a warm atmosphere. The contrast between them was obvious. Finally, all the passengers were boarded, the doors were closed, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. Jessica and Tom took their jump seats for the safety demonstration. Jessica went through the motions of the safety briefing like a robot, her mind elsewhere. Tom actually put some enthusiasm into it, making eye contact with passengers, making sure everyone was paying attention. Veronica was glued to the window, watching as the plane pushed back from the gate, as it began to taxi toward the runway. Her nervousness was mixing with excitement now. This was really happening. She was really flying alone. She pressed her face against the window, watching the terminal buildings pass by, watching other planes, watching the ground crew vehicles racing around. The plane reached the runway, paused, and then the engines roared to life. Veronica felt the acceleration, felt herself pressed back into her seat, watched the ground speed by faster and faster until suddenly, magically, the nose lifted and they were airborne. She gasped with delight as San Francisco dropped away beneath them, as they climbed through the clouds, as the world got smaller and smaller below. Once they reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Tom unbuckled and stood up, immediately beginning the first-class service. Jessica stood up too, her movements slow and reluctant. Tom started at the front of the cabin, working his way back with his cart, offering drinks and snacks with genuine warmth. Jessica started from the other end, her offers perfunctory and cold. And that's when it started. That's when everything that was about to unfold began with the smallest, most innocent gesture. Veronica, who'd been looking out the window at the clouds, suddenly remembered something she wanted to know. She'd been wondering about it since they took off. She reached up and pressed the call button, that little button Marcus had shown her, the one she could use if she needed anything. A soft chime echoed through the cabin. Tom was mid-conversation with David Chin, so Jessica was closer. She looked up, saw the call light above seat 2A, and felt a spike of irritation. Already? They'd barely been in the air 10 minutes and this kid was already demanding attention. Jessica set down the napkins she'd been arranging and walked over to Veronica's seat, her expression neutral but her eyes cold. Yes. Jessica's tone was clipped, not warm like Marcus's had been, not friendly like Tom's. Veronica, not yet sensing the hostility, looked up with bright, curious eyes. I was wondering, how do airplanes stay up in the sky? Like, what makes them fly? Is it just the engines or is there something else? It was such an innocent question, the kind of question a curious 8-year-old would ask. The kind of question that deserved a kind answer, or at least a redirect to someone who had time to explain. But Jessica just stared at her for a moment, that familiar resentment bubbling up. Of course this child wanted a physics lesson. Of course she expected Jessica to stop what she was doing and educate her. It's the engines and the wings, Jessica said curtly. Is that all? Veronica blinked, sensing something was off but not understanding what. How do the wings help? Jessica's jaw clenched. They just do. I have other passengers to attend to. And she turned and walked away, leaving Veronica feeling confused and a little hurt. Tom had noticed the interaction from the corner of his eye. He quickly finished with Mr. Chen and made his way over to Veronica. Hey Veronica. I heard you asking about how planes fly. That's such a great question. His voice was warm and encouraging, a stark contrast to Jessica's coldness. Veronica's face lit up. Yeah. I love airplanes, but I don't understand all of how they work yet. Tom smiled and crouched down next to her seat, even though he was busy, even though he had a full cart of drinks to serve. Okay, so the simple version is that the engines push the plane forward really fast, and the wings are shaped in a special way so when air moves over them, it creates something called lift. The air moving over the top of the wing moves faster than the air underneath, and that difference in speed creates an upward force that lifts the plane. Pretty cool, right? Veronica's eyes were wide with wonder. So the wings are like magic? Tom laughed. More like science, but it does seem like magic sometimes. I've been flying for years and it still amazes me. From the galley, Jessica watched this interaction with mounting irritation. Tom was wasting time, giving this kid a science lesson when they had work to do. And the way the child was looking at him, so grateful, so happy, it just highlighted how differently they were being treated. Tom was the good flight attendant. Jessica was the mean one. The story of her life. Veronica was feeling much better now, reassured by Tom's kindness. Thank you. Can I ask you something else? Of course. But let me finish getting everyone their drinks first and then I'll come back and we can chat more. How does that sound? Tom was genuinely happy to engage with her. Okay. Veronica agreed cheerfully. Tom stood up and went back to his cart, but he shot Jessica a look as he passed her. A look that said, "Come on, Jess. She's just a kid. Be nice." Jessica pretended not to see it. The flight continued and for a while, things were uneventful. Veronica alternated between looking out the window, coloring in her book, and hugging Mr. Patches. Tom brought her apple juice without her even asking, remembering that most kids liked apple juice. He also brought her a cookie. "Don't tell anyone, but I snagged you one of the good ones," he whispered conspiratorially. Veronica giggled. Margaret, the elderly woman across the aisle, struck up a conversation with Veronica. "What are you coloring, sweetheart?" "An airplane." Veronica held up her picture proudly. It was actually quite good for an 8-year-old, detailed and carefully colored. "You're very talented," Margaret said warmly. "Do you draw a lot?" "Yeah, I like drawing planes and buildings. My mommy says maybe I'll be an architect someday or an engineer." Veronica was completely unguarded, happy to chat with this nice grandmother figure. "Your mother sounds lovely. Does she travel for work?" Margaret asked, making polite conversation. She owns an airline, so she's always flying places and going to meetings. She works really hard." There was a touch of sadness in Veronica's voice, the loneliness of a child who doesn't see her parent enough. Margaret's eyes widened slightly. "She owns an airline? My goodness." "Yeah, this one. SkyBridge. That's her company." Veronica said it proudly, not showing off, just stating a fact. Margaret glanced at her husband Harold, who'd been listening while reading his newspaper. They exchanged a look. This was Catherine Hayes's daughter. They'd both read about Catherine Hayes in business publications. Harold had even met her once at a charity fundraiser years ago. She was a force of nature, a brilliant businesswoman who'd overcome enormous obstacles to build her company. And here was her daughter, flying alone, sweet and curious and completely unaware of how extraordinary her mother was in the business world. "Well, your mother must be very proud of you flying all by yourself," Margaret said gently. Veronica smiled. "I hope so. She couldn't come with me this time because of work, but she said I was brave enough to do it alone." Jessica, who was restocking the galley and within earshot of this conversation, felt that familiar bitterness rising again. Of course this child's mother owned an airline. Of course she came from wealth and privilege. Of course her life was easy. Jessica thought about her own daughter Emma, who she barely got to see. Emma didn't fly first class. Emma didn't have opportunities handed to her. Emma's mother was broke and struggling and losing at life. The unfairness of it all felt suffocating. About 45 minutes into the flight, Veronica was getting a bit restless. She'd finished coloring, she'd looked out the window until the clouds all started looking the same, and she was starting to feel thirsty again. She reached for her apple juice, which was on the tray table, but as she grabbed it, her elbow bumped the cup. It tipped over, spilling juice across the tray table and onto her dress. Oh no! Veronica gasped, watching the juice spread. She immediately felt embarrassed and upset. She'd made a mess. She grabbed some napkins and tried to clean it up, but it was too much for her little hands to manage. Reluctantly, feeling bad about being a bother, she reached up and pressed the call button again. The chime sounded. Tom was in the back galley helping another passenger with something. Jessica was closer, refilling ice. She heard the chime, looked up, saw it was seat 2A again, and something inside her snapped. This kid again. Always needing something, always demanding attention, always taking, just like everyone else in first class. Just like everyone who'd ever looked down on Jessica, dismissed her, made her feel small. Jessica stormed over to seat 2A, her professional mask slipping completely. Veronica looked up, her eyes already apologetic, her dress stained with juice. What now? Jessica's voice was harsh, loud enough that nearby passengers looked up. Veronica flinched at the tone. I'm sorry I spilled my juice. I tried to clean it, but I need help. Her voice was small, scared. Jessica looked at the mess, looked at this privileged little girl in her first-class seat, and 15 years of resentment, of financial struggle, of feeling like a failure, of losing her daughter, of being passed over and looked down on, it all came pouring out. She leaned down, her face close to Veronica's, her voice low but venomous. Your kind shouldn't be asking so many questions. Children like you should be grateful you're even up here. You think you're special because you're in first class? You think you can just press that button whenever you want and we'll come running? Well, let me tell you something, little girl. You need to shut up and be quiet before I move you to the back where you belong. Do you understand me? The words hung in the air like poison. Veronica's eyes filled with tears immediately. Her whole body went rigid. No adult had ever spoken to her like that. Ever. She didn't understand what she'd done wrong. She didn't understand what your kind meant, but she knew it was something bad, something cruel. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she clutched Mr. Patches to her chest, her shoulders shaking. The cabin went completely silent. Every single passenger in first class had heard. Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Harold's newspaper crinkled as he gripped it tighter, his face flushing with anger. David Chin stopped typing on his laptop and turned around completely, his expression shocked and furious. Even Tiffany looked up from her phone, her mouth hanging open. Tom, who just emerged from the back galley, heard the last part of Jessica's tirade. His face went pale. He rushed forward. Jessica. What are you doing? Jessica straightened up, reality starting to crash back in, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. I'm doing my job. This child needs to learn some discipline. She spilled juice. She's 8 years old. Tom's voice was rising, which was completely unlike him. David Chin unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, his full 6-foot frame imposing. That is completely unacceptable. I need to speak to the captain immediately. Jessica turned to face him, defensive. Sir, we're at cruising altitude. I can't disturb the captain for, you just verbally abused a child. David's voice was controlled but furious. You told her, her kind, doesn't belong in first class. Do you have any idea how disgusting that is? Other passengers were murmuring now, some pulling out phones. Tiffany had already started recording, her influencer instincts kicking in. This was insane. This was viral content happening right in front of her. Margaret unbuckled and came over to Veronica, sitting down on the armrest of her seat and putting an arm around the sobbing child. Sweetheart, it's okay. You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing at all. She looked up at Jessica with pure contempt. You should be ashamed of yourself. Harold stood up too, pulling a small notebook from his jacket pocket. He was a retired lawyer and his instincts were kicking in. I'm documenting everything. Your name tag says Jessica Morrison. I'm noting the time, the flight number, everything. What you just did is not only cruel, it's potentially discriminatory, and I will be filing a formal complaint. Jessica felt the walls closing in. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was just trying to do her job, just trying to maintain order, and now everyone was turning on her. I didn't mean. I was just trying to. But she couldn't finish the sentence because she didn't have a good excuse. There was no excuse for what she just said. Tom gently moved Jessica aside and kneeled down next to Veronica. Veronica, sweetie, I'm so sorry. Let's get you cleaned up, okay? The juice spilled, that happens all the time, it's not a big deal at all. His voice was soothing, trying to undo the damage Jessica had done. Through her tears, Veronica managed to whisper, "Did I do something bad? Why is she mad at me?" Tom's heart broke. "No, honey. You didn't do anything bad. Not one single thing. Sometimes adults have bad days and they say things they shouldn't. But this is not your fault. Okay?" Margaret was stroking Veronica's hair, and she looked at Tom with concern. "Does this child have someone we can call? Parents? A guardian?" Tom nodded. "She's traveling as an unaccompanied minor. She has a special phone to contact her mother if needed." Margaret turned to Veronica gently. "Sweetheart, do you want to call your mommy? I think she'd want to know what happened." Veronica hesitated. Her mother had told her the phone was for emergencies. But was this an emergency? She looked at the kind faces around her, at Tom's concerned expression, at Margaret's gentle eyes, and then she looked at Jessica, who was standing there looking confused and defensive, and Veronica felt something she'd never felt before. Not just hurt, but a sense that something very wrong had happened. Something her mother needed to know about. "Okay," Veronica said quietly. "I'll call Mommy." Margaret helped Veronica retrieve the phone from her bag. It was a sleek smartphone with only a few numbers programmed in. Veronica's small fingers shook as she selected Mommy and pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, powerful and warm at the same time. "Veronica? Baby, are you okay?" At the sound of her mother's voice, Veronica's composure completely crumbled. She started sobbing. "Mommy, the flight attendant was mean to me. I spilled my juice and I asked for help and she yelled at me and said bad things about me and I don't understand what I did wrong." There was a pause on the other end, a pause that felt like the calm before a storm. When Catherine Hayes spoke again, her voice was different. Still controlled, but with an edge of steel that could cut through concrete. "What did she say to you, baby? Tell Mommy exactly what she said." Veronica took a shaky breath. "She said, your kind shouldn't ask so many questions and that I should be quiet and grateful and that she'd move me to the back where I belong." Fresh tears streamed down her face as she repeated the words. The silence on the other end was deafening. Margaret, who was close enough to hear, watched as Veronica's mother processed what she'd just been told. When Catherine spoke again, her voice was ice. "Veronica, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You did nothing wrong. Do you hear me? Nothing. You are perfect exactly as you are, and that woman had no right to speak to you that way. Now, I need you to do something for me. I need you to hand the phone to that flight attendant. Can you do that?" Veronica nodded, even though her mother couldn't see her. She looked up at Jessica, who'd been standing there listening, her face growing paler by the second. "My mommy wants to talk to you." Jessica's hand trembled as she took the phone. She'd heard Veronica mention her mother owned the airline, but she'd dismissed it as a child's exaggeration or misunderstanding. But now, holding this phone, about to speak to whoever was on the other end, Jessica felt the first real tremor of fear. "Hello?" Jessica's voice was uncertain. "This is Catherine Hayes, CEO of SkyBridge Airlines. The airline you work for. The airline I own. And you just humiliated my daughter." Catherine's voice was calm, but there was a fury underneath it that was absolutely terrifying. Jessica's knees went weak. She actually had to grab the seat back to steady herself. "Miss Hayes, your daughter was..." "Was what? Asking questions? Being curious? Accidentally spilling juice? She's 8 years old. She's flying alone for the first time. She's nervous and trying to be brave, and you told her that her kind doesn't belong in first class. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Jessica's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Catherine continued, and every word was a hammer blow. "I built this airline on one principle, that every person, regardless of who they are, what they look like, or where they come from, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect when they fly. It's why I spent 20 years working my way up from a gate agent position. It's why I mortgaged everything I owned to buy a failing airline and turn it into what it is today. Because when I was a child, not much older than my daughter, I was treated exactly the way you just treated her. And I vowed that no one would ever feel that way on my airline." Jessica felt like she was going to be sick. "My head of HR is calling the captain right now. You are suspended effective immediately. Do not speak to my daughter again. In fact, don't speak to anyone, Go to the back galley and wait there until we land. Do you understand? Miss Hayes, please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, Jessica was begging now. You're done. Catherine hung up. Jessica stood there holding the phone, the entire first-class cabin staring at her. Tom gently took the phone from her hand and gave it back to Veronica. Then he looked at Jessica, and for the first time since they'd worked together, there was no friendliness in his eyes. You need to go to the back, Jess. Now. Jessica wanted to say something, wanted to defend herself, wanted to explain that she was struggling, that life had beaten her down, that she hadn't meant to hurt anyone. But she looked at Veronica's tear-stained face, at the contempt in the other passengers' eyes, and she knew there was nothing she could say. She turned and walked to the back galley, her legs moving mechanically, her mind reeling. As she disappeared toward the back of the plane, David Chen's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then made his way to the cockpit. A few minutes later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I want to personally apologize for an incident that occurred in the first-class cabin. Please be assured that we are addressing the situation and the employee in question has been suspended. We will be landing in Chicago as scheduled, where there will be additional personnel to assist. Thank you for your patience and understanding. Back in first class, Tom had taken over completely. He cleaned up the spilled juice, brought Veronica a fresh drink and a warm towel to clean her dress, and spent time just sitting with her, making sure she was okay. Margaret never left her side either, and even Harold, who wasn't usually the demonstrative type, offered Veronica a piece of his chocolate bar. David Chen returned from the cockpit and crouched down next to Veronica's seat. Hey there. I just wanted you to know something. My name is David Chen and I happen to be on the board of directors for SkyBridge Airlines. I work with your mom sometimes. Veronica's eyes widened. You know my mommy? I do. And I want you to know that what happened here today was not okay, and it will never happen again. Your mom has already put things in motion to make sure of that. You're a very brave girl, you know that? Veronica managed a small smile. Thank you. Tiffany, who'd recorded the entire incident, was faced with a decision. She had viral gold on her phone. This video could get millions of views, could blow up her follower count, could maybe even launch her influencer career to the next level. But as she watched this little girl, still shaken, still trying to understand why an adult had been so cruel to her, Tiffany felt something unfamiliar. Conscience. She made her way up to Veronica's seat. Hey sweetie. I'm Tiffany. I recorded what happened. I was going to post it online, but I wanted to ask you first if that's okay. Sometimes when bad things happen, showing people can help make sure it doesn't happen to other kids. But only if you're comfortable with it. Veronica looked at her mother's phone, thinking. Then she said something wise beyond her years. Will it help other kids not feel like I feel right now? Tiffany nodded. I think it might. Then okay. But can you not show my face too much? I don't want everyone to see me crying. I can do that, Tiffany promised. And she meant it. The rest of the flight was quiet. Tom made sure Veronica had everything she needed. Margaret and Harold kept her company, telling her stories about their own grandchildren, about Chicago, about anything that might distract her from what had happened. Veronica even managed to eat the snack Tom brought her, though she stayed quieter than before, more withdrawn. In the back galley, Jessica sat on a jump seat, her mind spiraling. Other flight attendants working economy had heard what happened. Some looked at her with pity, others with disgust. One of them, an older woman named Patricia who'd been flying for 30 years, sat down next to her. What were you thinking, Jessica? I don't know, Jessica whispered. I don't know what happened. I snapped. That child didn't deserve that. No child deserves that. I know. Jessica's voice broke. I know. I'm so tired, Patricia. I'm so tired of struggling, of feeling like I'm drowning, of watching everyone else have what I can't. And I took it out on an innocent kid and I can't take it back. Patricia sighed. No, you can't. And you're going to have to live with that. But Jessica, being tired doesn't give you the right to hurt people. Being angry at the world doesn't give you the right to make a child feel less than. You need help. Real help. Not just for your job, but for yourself. Jessica nodded, tears finally coming. She'd held it together this long, but now, sitting in the back of the plane, her career over, her actions indefensible, she broke down. Meanwhile, in Denver, Catherine Hayes was in a conference room full of executives. The meeting she'd been in had come to an abrupt halt the moment her phone rang. She'd stepped out, taken the call from her daughter, and her entire world had shifted. The business deal, the merger, the million-dollar contracts on the table, none of it mattered anymore. Her daughter had been hurt. On her airline. By her employee. Catherine made 3 phone calls. The first was to her head of HR, instructing immediate suspension of Jessica Morrison and a full investigation. The second was to her private pilot, telling him to get her jet ready immediately. She was going to Chicago. The third was to her mother, Veronica's grandmother, explaining what happened and asking her to meet Veronica at the airport. Then Catherine Hayes did something she rarely did. She addressed the entire room of executives, some of the most powerful people in the airline industry. "I'm sorry, but I have to go. My daughter needs me, and that takes priority over everything else. We'll reschedule." One of the executives, an older white man who'd been skeptical of Catherine for years, spoke up. "Catherine, we have 48 hours to close this deal or we lose the opportunity entirely. If you leave now." Catherine turned to him, and her expression was one he'd never forget. "Then we lose it. I've built one airline from nothing. I can build another if I have to. But I only have one daughter, and she will always come first. Always." She walked out, leaving the room in stunned silence. Catherine's private jet was in the air within an hour, racing toward Chicago. During the flight, she was on the phone constantly, talking to her legal team, to her PR department, to David Chin, who filled her in on every detail. And she watched the video. Tiffany had already posted it, and it was spreading like wildfire. The footage was damning. You could hear every word Jessica said. You could see Veronica's face crumple. You could feel the cruelty of it. The video had been up for less than 2 hours and already had over 1 million views. Comments were pouring in. Most were supportive of Veronica, outraged at Jessica, praising Catherine for her response. But some comments made Catherine's blood boil. People saying Veronica must have been badly behaved to provoke such a response. People defending Jessica, saying she was probably just having a bad day. People suggesting that maybe first class wasn't appropriate for unaccompanied minors. Catherine knew what she had to do. This couldn't just be about firing one employee. This had to be about systemic change. As SkyBridge Flight 2847 began its descent into Chicago, Veronica looked out the window at the city appearing below. She should have been excited. She was going to see Grandma. But instead she just felt tired and sad. She kept replaying Jessica's words in her mind, trying to understand them, trying to figure out what she'd done to deserve them. Margaret noticed. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Veronica shrugged. "I guess. I just don't understand why she was so mean. Did I ask too many questions? My mommy always says I should be curious, but maybe I shouldn't be." Margaret took Veronica's hand. "No, baby. Don't you dare stop asking questions. Don't you dare change who you are because of one bitter woman's cruelty. You are perfect exactly as you are. Smart and curious and kind. What happened today says everything about her and nothing about you." Harold nodded. "Your mother is right to encourage your curiosity. The world needs more people who ask questions, who want to understand how things work. Don't let anyone dim that light in you." Veronica nodded, but you could tell she didn't quite believe them yet. That kind of hurt doesn't heal with just words, no matter how kind. The plane touched down smoothly. As it taxied to the gate, Tom came on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago O'Hare. Before we disembark, I want to say something personal. What happened on this flight today was unacceptable and does not reflect the values of SkyBridge Airlines or the thousands of employees who work hard every day to make your journey comfortable and safe. To our young passenger in seat 2A, you are wonderful exactly as you are, and I'm honored to have had you on my flight." The entire first-class cabin erupted in applause. Veronica blushed, overwhelmed. As the plane pulled up to the gate, Tom made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We have a special guest boarding." The jetway door opened, and Catherine Hayes walked onto the plane. She was exactly as you'd imagine a CEO to be, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, carrying herself with absolute authority. But the moment she saw Veronica, all of that melted away. She was just a mother who needed to get to her child. "Mommy?" Veronica unbuckled and ran down the aisle, and Catherine caught her, scooping her up even though Veronica was getting too big to be carried. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Catherine held her daughter tight, and you could see her blinking back tears. Every passenger in first class was watching, many with their own tears. This was a mother's love, pure and fierce and unconditional. After a long moment, Catherine set Veronica down but kept holding her hand. She turned to address the cabin. "I want to thank those of you who comforted my daughter during what must have been a very difficult situation. Margaret and Harold Peterson, David Chin, Tom, and everyone else who showed her kindness when she needed it most. You embodied the best of humanity today." Margaret waved it off. "That child is a treasure. Anyone would have done the same. No, Catherine said firmly. Not everyone would have. And that's something I intend to change. Then Catherine's eyes found the back of the plane, where Jessica was still sitting in the galley. Their eyes met across the cabin, and Jessica looked like she wanted to disappear. Catherine made her way down the aisle, Veronica's hand still in hers. When she reached the galley, she looked at Jessica for a long moment. Jessica couldn't meet her eyes. Ms. Morrison, Catherine's voice was controlled. I want you to look at my daughter. Jessica forced herself to look at Veronica, at this beautiful child she'd been so cruel to. This is Veronica Marie Hayes. She is 8 years old. She loves airplanes and asking questions and making people laugh. She is kind and curious and brave. And today you made her feel like she was less than, like she didn't belong, like there was something wrong with her for simply existing in a space while black. Do you understand what you've done? Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. I don't think you do. Not yet. But you will. Catherine's gaze was unflinching. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you off this aircraft. You will never work for SkyBridge Airlines again, and I will personally ensure that every airline in our network is aware of this incident. Your career as a flight attendant is over. Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to her. Jessica looked at Veronica, this little girl who was watching her with wide, confused eyes. Veronica, I'm sorry. What I said to you was cruel and wrong, and you didn't deserve any of it. I was angry at my own life and I took it out on you, and that was inexcusable. You are a beautiful, smart, wonderful child, and I hope someday you can forgive me, even though I don't deserve it. Veronica didn't say anything. She just pressed closer to her mother. Airport security arrived, and Jessica was escorted off the plane. As she walked down the jetway for the last time as a flight attendant, her mind was spinning. She'd lost everything. Her job, her career, her reputation. The video was everywhere. Her name was everywhere. Her face was everywhere. She'd become a villain in a viral story, and there was no coming back from that. But somewhere deep down, beneath all the fear and regret and self-pity, a small voice whispered, "You deserve this." And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward actually changing. Back on the plane, Catherine addressed the cabin one more time. I want to be very clear about something. What happened today was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of something bigger, something I should have addressed more aggressively years ago. Discrimination, implicit bias, the ways people are made to feel less than because of the color of their skin or their background, these things happen every day in every industry including mine. And I take responsibility for not doing enough to prevent it. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Effective immediately, SkyBridge Airlines will be implementing mandatory bias training for every single employee, from the C-suite to the ground crew. We will be creating a direct reporting line to corporate for any incidents of discrimination. We will be reviewing our policies, our hiring practices, our promotion criteria, everything to ensure that this never happens again. And we will be establishing a fund to support organizations that fight discrimination and promote equity in travel and beyond. David Chin stood up. Catherine, as a board member, you have my full support. I'll propose these initiatives at our next meeting, and I'm confident the rest of the board will agree. Catherine nodded her thanks. Then she looked down at Veronica. And I want my daughter and every child who flies with us to know that they are welcome, they are valued, and they belong. Always. The passengers applauded again, and this time Veronica managed a small smile. Catherine, Veronica, and Veronica's grandmother, who'd been waiting at the gate, left the airport together. The media was already there, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Catherine gave a brief statement, reiterating her commitment to change and protecting her daughter by not allowing photos of Veronica's face. Over the next few days, the story exploded. Tiffany's video had tens of millions of views. News outlets picked it up. Think pieces were written. Catherine Hayes became a trending topic. And SkyBridge Airlines became the center of a national conversation about discrimination, about corporate responsibility, about how we treat each other. Catherine was on every major news program, speaking eloquently about the incident, about her plans for change, about the responsibility businesses have to their customers and employees. She didn't shy away from the hard questions. She admitted that her airline, like every airline, had work to do. She acknowledged the complaints that had been filed over the years that maybe hadn't been taken seriously enough. She owned it all. And remarkably, instead of hurting SkyBridge's reputation, Catherine's honesty and immediate action actually strengthened it. Bookings increased. Stock prices rose. Other airlines started reaching out, wanting to know about her training programs, her policies, her approach. Catherine Hayes had turned a crisis into a catalyst for industry-wide change. Meanwhile, Jessica Morrison's life had fallen apart. The video made her instantly recognizable. She couldn't go anywhere without being recognized, without facing anger and judgment. She lost her apartment when the landlord didn't renew her lease, not wanting the negative attention. Her ex-husband used the incident to file for sole custody of Emma, arguing that Jessica was unstable and unfit. And he won. Jessica hit rock bottom. She was living in her car, unable to find work, unable to face the world. She contemplated ending it all, sitting in that car one night with a bottle of pills, thinking about how much easier it would be to just disappear. But then her phone rang. It was Emma. "Mom?" Her daughter's voice was small, scared. "Mom, are you okay?" "Dad says you're not okay." Jessica closed her fist around the pills. "I'm okay, baby. I'm okay. Dad says you did something really bad. He showed me the video." "Mom, why did you say those things to that little girl?" Jessica started crying. "I don't know, Emma. I was angry and hurt and I took it out on someone who didn't deserve it. I made a terrible mistake. Are you going to be okay?" Emma's voice was so full of concern, so full of love despite everything. "I'm going to try, baby. I'm going to try really hard." After that call, Jessica made a decision. She checked herself into a mental health facility. She started therapy, real therapy, where she had to confront why she'd done what she'd done, where the anger came from, how her own pain had turned her into someone capable of hurting a child. It wasn't easy. Some days she wanted to quit. Some days she hated herself so much she couldn't get out of bed. But slowly, painfully, she started to understand. She started to see how she'd let bitterness poison her, how she'd blamed others for her own failures, how she'd projected her self-hatred onto a little girl who reminded her of everything she felt she'd lost. 3 months after the incident, Jessica was released from the facility. She had no job, no home, very little money, and a reputation that would follow her forever. But she also had something she hadn't had in years: clarity. She understood what she'd done, and she understood that spending the rest of her life making amends still wouldn't be enough. But she had to try. She started volunteering at a community center in a predominantly black neighborhood, working with kids, trying in some small way to undo the harm she'd caused. The people there knew who she was. They'd seen the video. But the director, an older black woman named Ms. Jean, took a chance on her. "I don't trust you," Ms. Jean said bluntly on Jessica's first day, "and I'll be watching you like a hawk. But I also believe in second chances, not for your sake, but because these kids need every positive adult they can get. You mess up once, you're gone. Understood?" "Understood," Jessica said quietly. And she didn't mess up. She showed up every day, she listened, she learned, she helped. The kids didn't know who she was, didn't know her story. To them, she was just Miss Jessica, the volunteer who helped with homework and organized activities and actually seemed to care. One day, about 6 months after the incident, a package arrived at Jessica's tiny studio apartment. Inside was a letter. It was from Catherine Hayes. "Ms. Morrison, I won't pretend to forgive you for what you did to my daughter. That's not my place, and frankly, I'm not there yet. But I've been following your journey over the past few months. I know about the facility, the therapy, the volunteer work. I know about the custody battle you lost. I know how hard things have been. I'm writing to tell you that I see you trying. And while I can't offer you your old life back, I can offer you something else. An opportunity. Not forgiveness, not redemption, but a chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. SkyBridge is launching a new program, Restorative Justice Training for employees who've made serious mistakes but show genuine commitment to change. You would be the first participant. It's a year-long program. It's intensive. It's uncomfortable. You would have to face what you did publicly as part of educational materials. You would have to work with the communities you hurt. You would have to prove, every single day, that you're different than the person you were on that plane. If you complete the program, I can't promise you a job with SkyBridge, but I can promise you a chance. A chance to work in our new Equity and Inclusion department, helping to make sure what happened with my daughter never happens to anyone else's child. This isn't generosity. This is a calculated decision based on my belief that people can change if they're willing to do the work. My daughter asked me to give you a chance. She's 9 years old and has more grace than I do. The choice is yours. Catherine Hayes. Jessica read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve any kindness from this woman or her daughter. But they were offering it anyway. Not as a free pass, not as absolution, but as a challenge. Could she do the work? Could she actually change? She called the number at the bottom of the letter. A woman answered, professional and cool. SkyBridge Airlines, Equity and Inclusion Department. My name is Jessica Morrison. I received a letter from Ms. Hayes. I want to accept the program. There was a pause. Ms. Morrison, before you commit, I need to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to. This is not going to be easy. You will have to relive the worst moment of your life repeatedly. You will have to face people who hate you. You will have to do community service in spaces where you're not welcome. You will have to change everything about how you see the world. And even after all of that, you might not get what you want at the end. Jessica took a deep breath. I understand. I want to do it anyway. Then we'll send you the paperwork. Welcome to the Restorative Justice Program. Don't make us regret this. The program was every bit as hard as promised. Jessica had to sit through hours of training where people explained, in excruciating detail, the impact of racism and discrimination. She had to watch videos of people sharing their own experiences of being made to feel less than. She had to read books, articles, testimonies. She had to face her own privilege, her own biases, her own role in perpetuating systems of harm. And then she had to face Veronica. It was part of the program, a mediated conversation between the harm doer and the harmed, only done when the harmed party was willing and ready. Catherine had asked Veronica if she wanted to talk to Jessica. Veronica, now 9 years old, had thought about it and said yes. They met in a neutral space with therapists present, with Catherine there as support. Veronica looked so much older than she had on that plane, more confident, but you could still see the shadow of that day in her eyes. Jessica didn't know what to say. How do you apologize for something like that? How do you make it right? But Veronica spoke first. Why did you say those things to me? Jessica took a shaky breath. Because I was hurting and I made you the target of that hurt. Because I saw you as having everything I didn't, and I resented you for it. Because I'd stopped seeing people as people and started seeing them as symbols of everything wrong in my life. And because I had biases, racist biases, that I'd never confronted or dealt with, and when I was stressed and angry they came out in the cruelest possible way. But I didn't do anything to you, Veronica said, her voice small. No, you didn't. You didn't do a single thing wrong. You were just being yourself, a curious, kind, wonderful kid, and I punished you for it because of my own brokenness. And I am so sorry, Veronica. I know that doesn't undo what I did. I know it doesn't take away how I made you feel. But I want you to know that every single day since then, I've been working to become someone different, someone who would never hurt another child the way I hurt you. Veronica was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, my mommy says hurt people hurt people. She's right. She also says that doesn't make it okay, but it helps to understand. Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. Your mom is very wise. Are you still hurt? Veronica asked. Sometimes. But I'm getting help now. I'm learning better ways to deal with pain that don't involve hurting other people. Veronica thought about that. Then she said something that broke Jessica completely. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because my grandma says holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. But I don't think we can be friends. That's more than fair, Jessica whispered. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you for your grace. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful for it. That conversation was recorded, with permission, and became part of SkyBridge's training materials. It was powerful, raw, and real. Thousands of employees watched it, and many said it changed how they thought about their own biases, their own assumptions, their own behavior. Jessica completed the year-long program. It was the hardest year of her life, harder than the divorce, harder than losing custody of Emma, harder than anything. But she did it. She showed up every day. She did the work. She changed. At the end of the program, Catherine met with Jessica one final time. They sat across from each other in Catherine's office, the same office where Catherine had taken that call from her daughter over a year ago. You completed the program, Catherine said simply. I did, Jessica replied. The evaluators say you did more than just complete it. They say you embraced it, that you've shown genuine transformation. Jessica didn't know what to say to that. Catherine leaned forward. I'm offering you a position. Not as a flight attendant. That part of your life is over. But as a coordinator in our Equity and Inclusion Department. You'll be developing training materials, facilitating difficult conversations, working with employees who've made mistakes, and helping to create the systems that prevent what you did from happening again. The pay isn't great. The work is emotionally exhausting. And you'll be facing your worst mistake every single day. Are you interested? Jessica met Catherine's eyes. Yes. More than anything. Then welcome to SkyBridge, Ms. Morrison. Don't make me regret this. Jessica didn't. She threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. She became one of the most effective trainers in the department, precisely because she didn't shy away from her own story. She used herself as an example, showed the video of her worst moment and said, "This is who I was. This is who I never want to be again. And this is the work I do every day to make sure I'm not." Employees responded to her honesty. She wasn't preachy or sanctimonious. She was raw and real and willing to be vulnerable. And slowly the culture at SkyBridge began to shift. Not overnight, not perfectly, but measurably. Discrimination complaints went down. Employee satisfaction scores went up. And when incidents did happen, they were addressed quickly and seriously. 2 years after the incident, Tiffany's video had over 50 million views. It had sparked a nationwide conversation about discrimination in travel, about corporate accountability, about second chances and restorative justice. It had inspired other airlines to implement similar programs. It had changed an industry. But more than that, it had changed lives. Veronica, now 10 years old, was thriving. The incident had left scars. She still sometimes hesitated before asking questions, still sometimes wondered if she belonged in certain spaces, but therapy had helped. And having a mother who'd turned her pain into purpose had helped even more. Veronica had started speaking at SkyBridge events, sharing her story in age-appropriate ways, talking about the importance of kindness and standing up for yourself. She was becoming a voice, young but powerful. Catherine's company had grown even larger. Other industries had reached out to her, wanting to know how she'd handled the crisis, how she'd turned it into change. She'd been on the cover of Forbes, Time, and Fortune. But her proudest moment wasn't any of those accolades. It was watching her daughter speak at a school assembly about her experience, and seeing how her vulnerability gave other kids the courage to share their own stories of discrimination. As for Jessica, she'd slowly rebuilt a relationship with her daughter Emma. It wasn't what it had been, and maybe it never would be, but Emma saw her mother trying, saw her changing, and that meant something. They had dinner once a week now, and Emma had even come to one of Jessica's training sessions at SkyBridge. Watching her mother take accountability, watching her educate others, watching her be vulnerable about her failures, Emma said something Jessica would never forget. "I'm not proud of what you did, Mom. But I'm proud of what you're doing now." 3 years after the incident, SkyBridge held its annual company-wide conference. Catherine was the keynote speaker, and she'd invited special guests. Veronica was there, of course, sitting in the front row next to her grandmother. But there were others too. Margaret and Harold Peterson, the couple who'd comforted Veronica on that flight. David Chin, who'd been instrumental in pushing through the policy changes. Tom, who'd left SkyBridge to start his own training company focused on customer service and dignity in travel. And Jessica, who would be presenting on the Restorative Justice Program. Catherine took the stage to thunderous applause. She looked out at thousands of employees, all wearing the SkyBridge uniform, all representing the company she'd built from nothing. 3 years ago, Catherine began, something happened on one of our flights that forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We weren't living up to our values. We had policies on paper, but we weren't enforcing them. We had statements about inclusion, but we weren't backing them up with action. And my daughter paid the price for that failure. The room was silent. But here's what I've learned in the 3 years since. Crisis doesn't define us. How we respond to crisis defines us. We could have buried that incident, paid it off, made it go away. Instead, we chose to face it head-on. We chose to change. And that choice has made us a better company, a better employer, and a better choice for travelers. Catherine gestured to the screen behind her, where statistics appeared. Discrimination complaints, down 73%. Employee satisfaction, up 42%. Customer loyalty, up 56%. Revenue, up 38%. Doing the right thing isn't just morally correct, it's good business. But more than that, it's who we need to be as human beings. She paused, her voice softening. "I want to introduce you to someone. My daughter Veronica is here today. She's 10 years old now and she's one of the bravest people I know. Baby, can you come up here?" Veronica stood up, wearing a purple dress that matched the one she'd worn on that flight 3 years ago. She walked up to the stage with confidence and Catherine put her arm around her. "Do you want to say anything?" Catherine asked gently. Veronica took the microphone. Her voice was small at first, but it grew stronger. 3 years ago, someone on one of your planes made me feel like I didn't belong. Like there was something wrong with me. Like I wasn't good enough." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "But then so many other people showed me that I did belong. That there was nothing wrong with me. That I was more than good enough. The passengers who stood up for me. Tom, who was kind when someone else was cruel. My mom, who turned my worst day into a chance to make things better for other kids. Veronica's eyes found Jessica in the crowd. And even the person who hurt me, she's trying to make sure it never happens to anyone else. That's important too. Because hurt people, but healing people can help heal people. The room erupted in applause, and Veronica handed the microphone back to her mother, then returned to her seat. Catherine composed herself. That's my daughter. That's the person we're all working to protect. Her and every other child, every other passenger, every other human being who trusts us to get them where they need to go safely and with dignity. She clicked to the next slide. This year, I'm announcing several new initiatives. First, we're establishing the Veronica Hayes Scholarship Fund, providing full college scholarships to students from underrepresented communities who want to pursue careers in aviation. Second, we're launching a partnership with schools across the country to provide aviation education programs, inspiring the next generation of pilots, engineers, and industry leaders. Third, we're committing $10 million to organizations fighting discrimination in travel and beyond. More applause. But most importantly, Catherine continued, we're doubling down on our commitment to change. Every new hire will go through our expanded equity training. Every manager will be evaluated not just on their numbers, but on how they create inclusive environments. Every complaint will be taken seriously, investigated thoroughly, and addressed appropriately. We're not perfect. We will make mistakes. But we will own them, learn from them, and do better. Catherine looked directly into the camera that was live streaming the event. To every passenger who's ever been made to feel less than on one of our flights, I'm sorry. We should have done better. We're doing better now and we won't stop. To every employee who's committed to this work, thank you. You're not just flying planes and checking bags and serving drinks. You're creating experiences that can change lives for better or worse. Please choose better. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. And to my daughter, who showed more grace and wisdom at 8 years old than most adults show in a lifetime, thank you for reminding us all of what really matters. Not profit margins or market share, but how we treat each other when no one's watching, when it's hard, when it would be easier to look away. Catherine ended her speech and the room stood in ovation. But she held up a hand. One more thing. I want to invite Jessica Morrison to the stage. The room went quiet. Everyone knew who Jessica Morrison was. Her story was part of the training. Her face was in the videos. She was both the cautionary tale and the example of transformation. Jessica stood up slowly, her heart pounding. She'd known this was coming. Catherine had asked her permission, but that didn't make it less terrifying. She walked to the stage on shaky legs and stood next to Catherine. Jessica, Catherine said, tell them why you're here. Jessica took the microphone, her voice trembling. 3 years ago, I was a flight attendant on Flight 2847 from San Francisco to Chicago. And I said something unforgivable to a little girl who was flying alone for the first time. I told her that her kind didn't belong in first class. I told her to shut up and be quiet. I made her cry. I made her feel less than. And I did it because I was broken, bitter, and full of biases I'd never confronted. The room was silent, listening. I lost my job. I deserved to lose my job. I lost my home, my reputation, nearly my life. And I deserved all of it. But what I didn't deserve was a second chance. Catherine Hayes didn't owe me anything. Veronica Hayes didn't owe me anything. But they gave me a chance anyway. Not because I earned it, but because they believed in the possibility of change. Jessica's voice grew stronger. I'm not here to say I'm redeemed. I'm not here to say I've made up for what I did. You can't make up for hurting a child. But I am here to say that I'm different than I was. I've done the work. I've faced my biases, my privilege, my own pain that I was projecting onto others. And now I spend every day trying to make sure no one else becomes who I was. She looked out at the audience. If you're sitting here thinking, I would never do what she did, I hope you're right. But I also thought I'd never do something like that. I wasn't a monster. I was just a person who'd never examined my own assumptions, who'd let bitterness and stress turn me into someone capable of cruelty. And if it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. Jessica took a breath. So I'm asking you, begging you to do the work before you're in crisis. Examine your biases. Check your assumptions. Remember that every passenger, every coworker, every human being you encounter is carrying their own story, their own struggles, their own dignity. Treat them accordingly. She handed the microphone back to Catherine. Thank you for this chance. I won't waste it. The applause that followed was different. Not celebratory but thoughtful. Respectful. Acknowledging the complexity of what they just witnessed. After the conference there was a reception. Catherine found herself standing with an unlikely group: Veronica, Jessica, Margaret and Harold, David, Chin and Tom. They'd all been brought together by one terrible moment, but they'd become something more. Not quite friends, the wounds were still too fresh for that, but something. Collaborators in change, maybe. Witnesses to transformation. Margaret looked at Veronica with pride. Look at you. All grown up and changing the world. Veronica smiled. I'm just trying to make things better. That's all any of us can do, Harold said wisely. David Chin raised his glass. To second chances, but only for those who do the work. They all drank to that. Tom pulled Jessica aside later. I never thought I'd see you again, Jess. And I definitely never thought I'd see you here, working for the company you almost destroyed. Jessica nodded. I never thought I'd be here either. But I'm grateful I am. Are you happy? Tom asked. Jessica considered the question. I'm purposeful. I'm useful. I'm learning. Happy? I don't know if I deserve happy yet. But I'm getting there. Good, Tom said simply. Keep going. As the evening wound down, Catherine found herself alone with Veronica on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights of San Francisco sparkled below them, planes taking off and landing at SFO in the distance. Mommy? Veronica said quietly. Yes, baby? Do you think she's really changed? Miss Jessica? Catherine thought about it. I think she's trying. And I think trying counts for something. But you know what matters more than whether she's changed? What? That we changed. That we turned your pain into purpose. That we didn't let that moment define us, we let our response define us. That's power, Veronica. Not the power to destroy someone who hurt you, but the power to transform pain into progress. Veronica nodded, wise beyond her years. I still think about it sometimes. That day on the plane. I know you do, baby. And that's okay. You're allowed to carry it with you. But you don't have to carry it alone, and you don't have to let it make you smaller. You let it make you bigger, braver, more compassionate. I'm so proud of you. Veronica leaned into her mother. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby. More than anything in this world. They stood there for a moment, mother and daughter, looking out at the city, at the plains, at the vast sky that Catherine had spent her life conquering and Veronica was just beginning to explore. 5 years after the incident, Veronica was 13 years old. She'd started a nonprofit called Belong, focused on combating discrimination in travel and public spaces. She spoke at conferences, testified before Congress about the importance of equity training, and mentored younger kids who'd experienced discrimination. The shy 8-year-old who'd cried on that plane had become a force for change. Jessica was still at SkyBridge, now a senior coordinator in the Equity and Inclusion Department. She'd helped develop programs that had been adopted by airlines, hotels, and travel companies around the world. She'd reconnected with her daughter Emma, who was now in college studying social work, inspired by her mother's transformation. Jessica would never forget what she'd done, would never stop carrying that shame, but she'd learned to channel it into something productive. Catherine's company had become the gold standard in the industry. Other CEOs called her for advice. Business schools used SkyBridge as a case study in crisis management and corporate social responsibility. And Catherine herself had become a voice not just in business, but in social justice, using her platform to advocate for equity in every sector. The video of that day, which had once represented the worst of humanity, had become something else. A reminder that we all have the capacity for cruelty but also for change. That systems can be broken but they can also be fixed. That one person's courage, whether it's a child speaking up or an adult taking accountability, can ripple out and change thousands of lives. On the 5-year anniversary of the incident, Catherine, Veronica, and Jessica did something unprecedented. They sat down for a joint interview broadcast live, to talk about what had happened and what had changed. The interviewer asked Veronica, if you could go back and change that day, would you? Veronica thought about it carefully. Part of me wants to say yes because it hurt. It really hurt. But if that day hadn't happened, all the changes that came after wouldn't have happened either. Other kids might have been hurt the same way. My mom might not have realized how much work still needed to be done. Miss Jessica might never have confronted her biases. So no, I wouldn't change it. I just want to tell my 8-year-old self that it was going to be okay, that something good would come from it. The interviewer turned to Jessica. What would you say to people who think you don't deserve a second chance? Jessica didn't hesitate. They're right to think that. I don't deserve it. Second chances aren't about deserving. They're about possibility. The possibility that people can change, that mistakes don't have to be the end of someone's story, that we can do better. But second chances have to be earned, every single day. I'm still earning mine. I'll be earning it for the rest of my life. Finally, the interviewer asked Catherine, "What's the most important lesson you've learned from all of this?" Catherine looked at her daughter, then at Jessica, then back at the camera. "That pain is inevitable, but what we do with it is a choice. We can let it make us bitter, or we can let it make us better. We can use it to justify hurting others, or we can use it to prevent others from being hurt. And that the most powerful thing any of us can do is choose compassion, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because that's when it matters most." The interview ended, and the three of them sat there for a moment in the silence that followed. Veronica was the first to speak. "That was intense." Catherine laughed. "Yes, it was. But important." Jessica stood up. "Thank you, both of you, for letting me be part of this, for letting me try to make amends." Veronica stood too. She walked over to Jessica, and for the first time since that day on the plane, she initiated contact. She held out her hand. Jessica took it, tears in her eyes. "You're doing good work, Miss Jessica," Veronica said. "Keep doing it." "I will," Jessica promised. "I will." And she did. They all did. Because that's the thing about transformation. It's not a moment, it's a commitment. A commitment to show up, to do the work, to be better than you were yesterday. 10 years after the incident, Flight 2847 from San Francisco to Chicago took off on a Tuesday morning, just like it had a decade before. But this time things were different. The flight attendants had all been through extensive training on implicit bias, conflict resolution, and creating inclusive environments. The unaccompanied minors were monitored with a new system that Catherine had personally designed, ensuring they felt safe and supported throughout their journey. And every employee, from the CEO to the newest gate agent, understood that their job wasn't just about moving people from point A to point B. It was about treating every single person with dignity and respect. In seat 2A sat a young black girl about 8 years old, flying alone for the first time. She was nervous, clutching a stuffed animal, looking out the window with wide eyes. The flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah who'd been through Jessica's training program, approached her with a warm smile. "Hi there. What's your name?" "Maya," the girl said shyly. "Well, Maya, I'm Sarah, and I'm going to make sure you have the best flight ever. Do you have any questions about anything?" Maya hesitated, then asked, "How do the wings make the plane fly?" Sarah smiled and sat down in the empty seat next to her. "Oh, that's such a great question. Let me explain." And as the plane took off, carrying Maya toward her own adventure, carrying all the passengers toward their destinations, carrying the weight of all the changes that had come before, one thing was clear: progress wasn't perfect, but it was possible. Because one little girl had the courage to tell her mother what happened. Because one mother had the power to demand change and the wisdom to offer grace. Because one woman had hit bottom and chosen to climb back up. Because witnesses had refused to stay silent. Because systems were questioned and reformed. Because people, imperfect and flawed and capable of both great harm and great healing, chose to do better. That's the story. Not of a perfect ending, but of a better beginning. Not of erasing the past, but of learning from it. Not of forgetting what happened, but of making sure it meant something. Veronica Hayes is 23 years old now. She's in graduate school studying public policy, working to create legislation that protects travelers from discrimination. She's been invited to speak at the United Nations, has written a book about her experience, and has helped countless young people find their voices in the face of injustice. When people ask her about that day on the plane, she doesn't shy away from it. She owns it, not as a trauma that defines her, but as a catalyst that shaped her purpose. Jessica Morrison is 51 now. She still works for SkyBridge, training thousands of employees every year. She's also a speaker, traveling to companies and organizations to share her story, to warn about the dangers of unchecked bias, to prove that change is possible if you're willing to do the uncomfortable work. Her daughter Emma is a therapist now, working with families in crisis, inspired by watching her mother's journey from breakdown to breakthrough. And Catherine Hayes is 62, still running SkyBridge, still pushing for change, still proving that you can be successful and socially conscious, that profit and purpose aren't mutually exclusive, that the way we treat each other matters more than anything else. The video is still online. 50 million views have turned into 100 million, into a cultural touchstone, into a teaching tool used in schools and businesses and homes around the world. And every comment section, every share, every conversation it sparks is a reminder. We're all one moment away from being the villain or the hero in someone else's story. The choice is ours. So what would you do? If you saw someone being mistreated, would you speak up? If you made a terrible mistake, would you do the work to change? If someone hurt you, Could you find space for both accountability and grace? These aren't hypothetical questions. These are the questions we face every single day in big ways and small ways, in moments that seem insignificant but ripple out in ways we can't imagine. The flight attendant who told a little girl to shut up thought it was just another day at work. She thought her words wouldn't matter, that no one would care, that she could let her pain overflow onto someone else without consequences. She was wrong. But here's the thing that gets lost sometimes in the outrage, in the viral videos, in the calls for cancellation. She was also human. Flawed, broken, struggling, capable of cruelty but also capable of change. And recognizing that humanity doesn't excuse what she did. It just acknowledges that we're all capable of both our worst and our best selves, and which one we choose matters. This story isn't really about an airline or a flight attendant, or even a little girl who was hurt. It's about all of us. About the systems we create or tolerate. About the biases we carry or confront. About the pain we inflict or heal. About the world we accept or change. Veronica Hayes could have let that day make her small, fearful, convinced that she didn't belong. Instead, she let it make her powerful. Catherine Hayes could have just fired Jessica and moved on, protecting her brand without changing her company. Instead, she chose transformation over optics. Jessica Morrison could have given up, disappeared, let shame consume her. Instead, she chose the harder path of accountability and growth. And all of us watching this story unfold, we have choices too. We can watch the video, feel outraged for a moment and then scroll past. Or we can let it challenge us. Make us examine our own biases. Make us think about how we treat people who are different from us, who have less power than us, who are vulnerable in our presence. Make us consider what kind of person we want to be when things get hard, when we're tired, when no one's watching. Because here's the truth that Veronica understood at 8 years old. Hurt people, but healing people help heal people. We're all carrying something. We've all been hurt. The question is, what do we do with that hurt? Do we weaponize it or transform it? 10 years, hundreds of policy changes, thousands of trained employees, millions of safer journeys, countless lives touched by one little girl's courage and one mother's conviction, and yes, even one woman's willingness to face the worst version of herself and become someone better. That's the legacy of Flight 2847. Not perfect but purposeful. Not painless but powerful. Not the end of discrimination or bias or cruelty in the world, but proof that we can fight it, we can change it, we can do better. So if you're watching this and you've been hurt, know that your pain matters, your voice matters, your courage to speak up can change things. If you're watching this and you've messed up, know that accountability and growth are possible, but only if you're willing to do the real work. And if you're watching this and you have power, remember that what you do with it matters more than anything else. The little girl who was told to shut up and be quiet didn't stay quiet. She spoke up, and her voice echoed across an industry, across a nation, across millions of screens and hearts and minds. And somewhere, right now, there's another child on another plane, being treated with dignity because of changes that started with Veronica's courage. That's everything. This is the story of how one terrible moment became a catalyst for change. How pain became purpose. How the worst of humanity sparked the best of it. And how 3 people, a mother, a daughter, and the woman who hurt them, all chose something harder and better than what was expected. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you think about how you show up in the world, then let it do more than just entertain you for 2 hours. Let it change you. Let it inspire you to speak up when you see injustice. Let it push you to examine your own biases. Let it remind you that every interaction matters, every word carries weight, every choice we make shapes the world we live in. And if you believe that people can change, that systems can be reformed, that a better world is possible if we're willing to fight for it, then don't just watch this story. Share it. Talk about it. Let it start conversations that matter. Because that's how change happens. Not just through policies and programs, but through millions of individual people choosing, every single day, to be better than they were yesterday. Subscribe if you want more stories that don't just entertain but illuminate the quiet power, the resilient grace, and the transformative courage within the Black experience and beyond. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances that are earned, in accountability that leads to growth, in justice that makes room for both consequences and compassion. And remember, you are enough. You are loved. You are powerful. Just like a bracelet once said to a little girl who needed to hear it. Just like we all need to hear it sometimes. This is Black Lens, where we don't just tell stories. We change the lens through which stories are told. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep demanding better, and keep believing that your voice matters. Because it does. The end.